You think being the go-to fixer for your company's technical debt is your greatest job security. It isn't. It's the silent killer of your wealth. Every time you say yes to patching a legacy leak for someone else, you're accidentally saying no to building your own empire. You aren't being helpful, you're being harvested. The truth is, you are drowning in other people's priorities. You are the human glue holding together a ship that was never designed to carry you to your own dreams. And every day you keep winning for someone else's bottom line is another day you delay becoming the architect of your own life. This transformation begins with a single, uncomfortable realization, the same one that hit Pedro on a Tuesday morning in a fluorescent-lit office. Pedro sat in the flickering glow of his dual monitors, his fingers flying across the keys to resolve a database deadlock that wasn't even his responsibility. Around him, the office hummed with the sound of people who knew exactly how to use him. He was the reliable shadow, the man who could fix the unfixable. Every time a Slack notification chimed, Pedro felt a hit of dopamine. Being needed felt like a survival strategy. But as he looked at the clock, 6:42 p.m., he realized he had spent 10 hours fixing someone else's technical debt and 0 minutes on his own digital leverage. He opened a private tab, staring at the blueprints for his ghost project, an autonomous compliance agent designed to solve the very leaks he was currently patching by hand. If he could finish this, he wouldn't need this desk, this badge, or this boss. But the project had been sitting at 40% completion for 3 months. Why? Because Pedro was too busy being a hero for a company that measured his value by how much of his life he was willing to trade for their stability. The cost of helpful was finally coming due. He looked at a thank you email from a project manager he barely knew. It was a polite note of appreciation, a tiny gold star for his professional forehead. Then he looked at his bank account and his stagnant personal goals. The gold star didn't pay for freedom. He realized that his reputation as a fixer was actually a cage. He wasn't building a career, he was maintaining a prison. To build his empire, he would have to do the one thing he feared most. He would have to let someone else's fire burn. The morning light filtered through the office blinds, casting long, cage-like shadows across Pedro's desk. Usually this was the hour he spent clearing the path, answering the frantic pings from the night shift, fixing the broken build and being the hero. But today, Pedro felt the weight of the invisible fence. He had decided that his yes was no longer for sale to the highest bidder of chaos. He opened his IDE, pulled up the code for his autonomous compliance agent, and did something that felt like a physical strike against his own DNA. He set his Slack status to away. The first test came at 10:15 a.m. A project manager named Sarah hovered near his cubicle, her face a mask of performative urgency. Pedro, the client reporting module is throwing a 505 error. It's a 5-minute fix for you, right? In the past, Pedro would have smiled, minimized his personal project, and dove into the wreckage. He would have felt that familiar surge of utility. But today he looked at the ghost architecture on his screen, a system that could eventually replace the very module Sarah was complaining about, and he felt the fence hold firm. "I can't look at that right now, Sarah," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking in his chest. "I have a high-priority architecture task I need to finish." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah blinked, her brain seemingly unable to process a no from the office's most reliable human. She lingered for a moment, waiting for the apology that usually followed, but Pedro simply turned back to his screen. He watched her walk away in his peripheral vision, expecting the building to shake or his manager to appear with a pink slip. Instead, nothing happened. The world didn't end. Sarah simply went to find someone else to harvest. Pedro realized then that the only thing keeping the fence from being built all these years wasn't the company's demands. It was his own fear of being unnecessary. The silence of the afternoon was no longer a vacuum to be filled. It was a workshop. For the first time in his career, Pedro wasn't reacting to the frantic pull of a legacy crisis. He was standing at the peak, looking down at the efficiency gaps he had spent years bridging with his own manual labor. With the hours he had reclaimed by maintaining his invisible fence, he finally executed the command that would change everything. He activated his AI swarm. One agent began scraping the public compliance databases, identifying the exact friction points he used to fix by hand. A second agent, a specialized LLM he had fine-tuned, began drafting the resolution reports. A third agent handled the outreach to mid-sized firms struggling with the same technical debt that currently paralyzed his own employer. Pedro watched the logs scroll by on his screen. It was a strange, haunting sensation. The work was getting done, but his hands were still. He was no longer the engine, he was the architect. By Thursday, the first ghost revenue hit his account. It was a modest subscription from a boutique firm in Chicago, but the implications were massive. That single payment represented more profit than a week of his corporate salary, and the overhead was nothing but a few cents in API credits. He looked around the office at his colleagues, who were still drowning in a sea of CC'd emails and redundant meetings. They were still trading their life force for a paycheck, while Pedro had successfully detached his income from his time. He wasn't just working, he was scaling. The ghost empire was no longer a skeleton in a folder. It was a living, breathing entity that existed in the cracks of the old world. The resignation was not a moment of triumph, but one of profound, quiet clarity. Pedro sat in his manager's glass-walled office, the same room where he had once hungrily accepted high-impact patches that were really just chores in disguise. He placed his physical badge on the mahogany desk, the plastic clicking against the wood like a closing shutter. "I'm moving on," he said, and for the first time in a decade, he didn't offer a backup plan to help them transition or a promise to stay on call for emergencies. The reaction was immediate and telling. His manager didn't ask about Pedro's future or offer a sincere thank you for his years of service. Instead, a flash of genuine panic crossed his face. "You can't leave now, Pedro. The Q3 migration is a mess. You're the only one who knows the legacy logic. We'll increase the bonus. Name your number." In that moment, the tool finally saw the user. The corporation wasn't afraid of losing a valued colleague. They were terrified of losing their most efficient, low-cost manual bypass for their own technical debt. They had built their stability on his sacrifice, and now that the human glue was drying up, the ship was beginning to groan. Pedro realized then that he had never been indispensable in a way that benefited him. He was merely convenient in a way that benefited them. As he walked out of the building, he felt the final threads of his old identity snap. He wasn't a resource to be managed or a headcount to be filled. He was a ghost architect, and his invisible empire was already generating more value in the background than his salary ever could. He stepped into the sunlight, a man who had finally stopped fixing the past so he could own the future. The transition from architecting to reigning was a shift in the very frequency of Pedro's life. The strategic silence was no longer a void he felt the need to fill with corporate noise. It was the hum of a well-oiled machine. His AI swarm had grown from a single script into a sophisticated network of digital leverage. While his former colleagues were likely trapped in an emergency war room trying to decode the legacy logic he had left behind, Pedro sat on a balcony overlooking a city that no longer owned his time. In the ghost economy, growth didn't require more meetings, it required more compute. As he scaled his compliance agents to serve a dozen new firms, his daily work evolved into a high-level curation of logic. He wasn't typing code to fix errors, he was refining the prompts that allowed his agents to solve them. He had achieved the ultimate inversion. His income was now inversely proportional to his physical effort. The ghost founder wasn't a job title, it was a state of being. He had successfully decoupled his worth from his presence. Pedro looked at his phone not out of anxiety, but out of curiosity. A notification showed a successful automated renewal from his largest client. No quick favors, no just one more things, and no lifesaver emojis. Just a clean, professional exchange of value for autonomy. He realized that the greatest technical debt he had ever paid off wasn't the company's code. It was his own belief that he had to be a servant to be significant. He was finally the master of his own destiny, a ghost in the machine of the old world, and the architect of a future that ran on light and logic.